it is a business at the end of the day, and you don't want to be doing everything yourself. Otherwise, you won't really have much of a lifestyle at the end of it. Think sympathetically about where you are in your decor and what you offer. That also is really pleasing for the guest, because you feel, yes, that this fits. This is how it should be. It is absolutely possible. In fact, it's one of the attractions of this industry is that you can get started and get going with a relatively small initial outlay.
Hello and welcome to the Glamping Tech podcast. Today we're joined by Steph Curtis-Raleigh, publisher of International Glamping Business magazine. She's an absolute expert on the glamping industry with an in-depth knowledge of industry trends, the hospitality sector as a whole and the business side of glamping, which is of particular interest in today's episode. As ever, we hope you find it useful, and don't forget to give Glamping Tech a call if you need help in any area of setting up or running your glamping site. Hi Steph, thank you for coming on.
Hello there, Nick. Great to be here.
So how did you get into the glamping industry?
Well, a little roundabout route in a way. I came via the holiday parks, I suppose, because my background is actually in trade journalism, but in the amusement and gaming sector was where I cut my teeth. And a colleague of mine, who's Peter Rusbridge behind the Glamping Show, he came to me with a magazine for the holiday park sector that needed a little bit of work doing to it, and that's how I came to be writing about this side of the industry. From holiday parks, we soon identified glamping as a growing sector that nobody was really covering. That's about 5, 6 years ago now, and I was very keen to start my own magazine after working as an editor and a freelancer. So I said, yes, this industry needs a glamping trade magazine. And that's how it got started.
And that's International Glamping Business magazine.
That's right. And now the Americas one as well. We've just done our first publication dedicated solely for the States.
And so for the benefit of the audience, what sort of things do you cover in that magazine?
Well, in both magazines, much the same thing. It's looking at the industry from the eyes of somebody who's operating or setting up or operating a glamping business. So it's a lot of product-based editorial, because people are looking for something or other, whether it be a hot tub or a new piece of accommodation, or some of the issues that they may face around planning or wastewater, all of those sorts of things that people are thinking about, and hopefully they might read something in the magazine that helps them on their journey to successful operation.
And do you cover also wider industry trends as part of that as well?
Totally. We're always talking to people and interested in what's going on, and trying to identify trends. And I think it helps that we are international. So what's happening in different countries, it's often with a slightly different flavour. So people come at it from different angles. So that makes it, quite interesting to see, for example, with the States, how they immediately, the people that we met over there, they thought bigger. Whereas in the UK, we identified that most of our readership and the people that attended the show, they probably were operating fewer than 10 units of accommodation, given the size of the UK, the cost of land, and so on and so forth. In the States, they were immediately thinking about hundreds of units of accommodation, or chains of operations. So they were looking at multiple locations. So they were thinking bigger.
Do you think it would be possible to protect glamping's unique sort of ethos with large like sites, let's say hundreds of units? Do you think that it would be possible to protect the sort of ethos of glamping, which is, I don't know, how would you define the ethos of glamping?
Well, the
And
quirkiness and the
yeah, that sort of
uniqueness of
thing.
it. I think we are far more likely to preserve that in the UK, where we have a far greater number of small independent locations. We identified in our report when we did it in 2019 that there were sort of just shy of 4,000, 3,700, something like that, glamping sites in the UK. I do think there's more competition coming in, and more projects that we will see being built over the next year or so, due to the demand from staycations. I think that some of the bigger operators are now looking at the sector. So we will see more hotel resort style glamping in the UK as well as in other locations. You can't stop that, but the guests will dictate what they want. And I think there will always be a demand for something that's unique and quirky and fun. So if that's the way you're going, I think it's a great idea. Be individual, and you'll be successful if you do it well.
From your experience of the US market, could you see anything that UK site owners could glean from that they could use to improve their sites?
Well, I think that thinking big and having an exit strategy, not just thinking about it as a lifestyle business. There's nothing wrong with having a lifestyle business that suits your desire, the way you want to live, your ethos. But it is a business at the end of the day, and you don't want to be doing everything yourself. Otherwise, you won't really have much of a lifestyle at the end of it, because you'll be too busy cleaning and taking bookings and doing everything. So I think that there is something to be said for thinking about it in a way that you can pass it on, or you can sell it, and making sure that you keep your records, you keep your reporting going for your occupancy rates, all of these things that will be valuable when it comes to passing the business on at some later stage, because we never know in life what life might throw at us.
That's interesting. Actually, we haven't really discussed that so far. In episode 3 with Marag Salabanks, who runs Braveview Glamping, we did discuss how you need to treat your site as a business as well as just a hobby, and you need to think carefully. But because glamping is growing so organically, really, there is a sense that it's different to any other business. But I imagine as it matures, it will be seen as more of a cold hard investment decision as well. Is there anything particular that you would recommend people do if they do want to set it up as an investment and sell at a later date? What sort of things would you recommend they do so that the business will be sellable eventually?
Yes, what I would recommend for keeping a business-like approach is, probably, if you're choosing a site, um, maybe consider the glamping site not being in the grounds of your own home, because obviously when you come to sell on, then you're going to lose your own house, and it might not be somebody else's ideal location. Whereas the business, if it's freestanding, if it's in its own setting, and not reliant on a house, then that might be easier to pass on at the end of the day, and easier also to price up, because you're not really valuing the business for the property as well, but just more for the business itself. So, and the other thing that I would consider, if you're renting land off somebody else, um, obviously that's going to affect the value of the business. And glamping is difficult enough to work out what the value of that business is without taking into consideration uh, rental agreements. It's not impossible, and if you do go down that path, just make sure that you've got proper contracts in place, so that people can see that there is a future to taking this business forward.
So obviously you do cover wider industry trends in the course of your work at International Glamping Business. What trends are really exciting you at the minute, and what do you think will become big in the next few years?
Oof. Well, you know that we've been doing a number of summits from June of last year. We started the Eco Hotel Summits, and it's funny that people often think that that's a separate subject to glamping, whereas I think it's just an extension of the same thing, because glamping by its very nature, outdoor accommodation, often off grid or certainly eco-friendly in its scope. This aspect of glamping really excites me, and I think there's a great opportunity for people to promote that aspect of what they do and put it more front and center, because that's what guests are looking for. They're looking to go away and feel good about their their trip. There's so much guilt around travel at the moment, which is such a shame, not just because of COVID, but because of um, driving, flying, all of those things that have a negative connotation because of the carbon footprint. So I think that if you can make your destination a feel good destination because of all of the things that you're doing to help the guest offset their carbon footprint, and without being preachy, but just to um, show that you are a business with a conscience, and that you are benefiting the environment around you, not just the physical, the land, but also the other businesses in your area, so that you're supporting local farmers, that you're supporting local suppliers. If you provide a breakfast basket, that those items are locally uh, homegrown, there are eggs from the local farm, there are this, that, and the other. This makes such a difference, and it really does. I think this is a trend that this industry needs to embrace even more than it already does, and tell the guests that that's what you're doing, and it will make a massive difference to how your guests feel.
Yeah, it's got a twofold benefit, hasn't it? Obviously, you're doing good, you're doing a moral good, but also it's a good marketing tool as well, because if you, as you say, if you can talk about it and it gives you good content, it gives you a good name, and so yeah, moral and financial benefits to that, and it also marries itself well with the whole back to nature element of glamping, which is key. And I've discussed with a few people about how the definition of luxury is changing, and it's going away from traditional definitions of luxury within, say, the hotel industry to um, nature itself is a luxury.
I totally agree with you. And uh, one interview I did last year, and I was a bit nervous when I did it, was with Sanu Shivdasani of Suniva. He's got a number of resorts out in the Maldives, and he said that luxury is something that you don't get every day, something out of the ordinary. that luxury used to be about a restaurant named after a famous chef or flashy things. And he said, but that's actually quite easy to get. So luxury should be something that you don't find every day. And so for him, he has like a no shoes policy on in his resorts, and people that go to his resorts, they might be heads of finance or very wealthy people, and they have to give up their shoes when they arrive, and they walk barefoot all week, and they experience things that they wouldn't normally experience, and that is the absolute height of luxury. And I'm currently here in London, and I haven't eaten anything homegrown. I buy everything from the supermarket. I've not been able to go out for a really good walk where I've not seen other people thronging the paths. I'm desperate to get outside and go somewhere where I can look around and there's not another soul around, and I've got the whole of the vista to myself. To me would be the absolute utmost of luxury, and I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So luxury is different. It's about being different, and it's about offering something that people don't get at home. I think that's a good lesson for the audience, actually. If you try and I know at NC 500 Pods, the site that our founders set up, even just something as basic as Amazon Alexa and smart lighting, if people don't have them at home, it's like, oh, that's nice. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go away raving about it, how it's, the most amazing place they've ever stayed in, might well be, but just something that you can't get at home. I think that you'll get a good response from it at your site, whatever it is.
Totally. And whether that's something that you've created, like a jar of homemade jam, or I once stayed somewhere where they had some insect repellent that was made sort of there themselves with lemongrass, and which was really a lovely thing, and something like that you wouldn't normally find. It's a bit different and it's unique to your area, your offering. I think that's really what luxury should be.
And it shows you don't have to invest heavily either. You don't have to get a world famous interior designer. You can just something little like that. It costs barely anything, but can really add value to your site.
Yes, absolutely. It's the thoughtfulness, it's the authenticity. It's if you're somewhere near the sea, then obviously staying somewhere where you've got uh, maybe driftwood or shells or things like that is a great thing. But if you are in the middle of a city, you wouldn't expect to find those things there. So to think sympathetically about where you are in your decor and what you offer, um, that also is really pleasing for the guest, because you feel, yes, that this fits, this is how it should be, and it's unique, it's not mass produced, it's something special. And I think that glamping offers that opportunity, with its quirkiness, to do that sort of sympathetic theming, and not a mass produced, as you would expect in a hotel to see the same print in every room or this sort of thing. So I think it's luxury doesn't have to be expense, it can be simplicity, but it's got to be sympathetic with its surroundings.
Yeah, that's exactly what Eden said in episode 5. I asked him the question that I'll be asking you at the end, actually. If he could give one tip to prospective or existing glamping site owners, what would it be? And he said, look at the location, look at what it offers, and adapt yourself to that, rather than just trying to force yourself into that location with a sort of bog standard offering. And yeah, that's a good point. So you mentioned earlier that you used to help publish a holiday park magazine. Do you see those industries as the holiday park industry as being in competition with the glamping industry, or do you see them as being in tandem?
Um, I see them as being in tandem. I think that in some ways they are they're quite different. Holiday parks, they are designed by their very nature to accommodate larger numbers of people. They usually have an infrastructure where they've got leisure facilities, restaurants, all that sort of thing tied in, and they're little villages. Really, they are. Um, they provide a tiny microcosm of society, and what I noticed when I was running the magazine was that there were some really exciting developments in the holiday park sector where the kind of knobbly knees, Butlin style image couldn't be further from the truth, and they were producing some seriously stylish, aspirational holiday park accommodation and lodges and so on and so forth. Um, and of course, starting to offer glamping as well. But it was tended to be as an add on to their existing offer, really. And it would probably be, in most cases, still fairly generic kind of glamping. So they might put in 10 safari tents or whatever, but the safari tents would still have roughly the same kind of decor, it in line with what else they were offering. So it's not the same as somebody setting up a glamping site that's uniquely a glamping site. Um, it comes from a different place. I feel anyway, that's my impression of it. So I wouldn't say there's competition, because I think that the person that would book a treehouse stay in an independent glamping site would not necessarily choose to go in a holiday park setting. And there are various different offers that blur the lines. I mean, I think when Centre Parks first, the first Centre Parks, they were neither fish nor fowl. They were not really the traditional holiday park. They offered something slightly different, but even that has to be reinvented over the years. And I stayed in a lodge in one of the Centre Parks recently in the last couple of years, and that was very much an upmarket glamping style offer. Um, but it again, it was a bit odd, really, because when you arrived, you were filtered off and taken away from the rest of the people. You were in a much more secluded area, but you could access all of their restaurants and the other facilities. So it never quite feels as authentic as a standalone glamping site where you can really lose yourself in nature. So I don't know. I think it's all good because it means people understand the concept of glamping a bit more, but people are discerning, and they might want to try that because they've got younger children and they want a swimming pool option as well, or they might be people who say, no, I just really want to lose myself in nature and I'd rather be away from any of that kind of commerce.
Would you say that there's anything that the glamping industry could take from the holiday park industry, or do you think it has to stay in its own unique way? Because if it takes too many elements from the holiday park industry, it'll become a bit too generic.
Well, I think that I would like to see some more glamping sites offering aspects of what holiday parks offer, in the sense of some more social hubs, maybe some more service in terms of food and beverage, that kind of thing. I think that there are opportunities above and beyond the accommodation to make money for the business. And also, as a guest, you don't necessarily always want to be preparing your own food. I went to stay in a site. It was the October half term, and it was dark by sort of 6-7 p.m., and the last thing I wanted to do was try to cook something outdoors in the cold and dark. So luckily they had a sort of restaurant hub, which was brilliant because you could go in, you could be warm, you could. They did pizza making evenings, and we could have a bottle of wine. So much nicer than being stuck in your accommodation in the dark, trying to make a fire. So for people to think that way, they can extend their season. They can also provide an opportunity for people to socialise a little bit more. I think this is all good, and this is sort of blurring the line with the holiday park a little bit, I suppose. So why not? I think we can all learn from each other, but each site is unique and individual, and what works on one site might not work on another.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we will start to see that sort of thing as the industry matures, because we tend to forget that glamping is such a young industry, whereas the holiday park industry has been around for decades and decades. So we are still at the very forefront of it, really, aren't we? And it will be interesting to see how it develops and whether it does take elements from the bigger and more
Yeah,
traditional industries.
I think there's also a word warning really in that as well, in the sense that we've sprung up around sort of quirky pieces of accommodation, very small businesses in the UK. And um, we we don't have that established background like holiday parks, like the B&B industry. And I suspect that a number of glamping site operators are not even fully aware of the local bylaws that govern hospitality businesses. And often when I've chatted to people at shows, um, I get the impression that when they are receiving guests, it's almost as though they are having house guests, people coming to stay with them as personal friends. And there are a number of things that you can't do. You're legally not really supposed to do. For example, offering alcohol to guests, without a license, picking up guests from the station. Sounds like a pretty innocuous thing to do, but that actually, as a business owner, contravenes the bylaws for taxi cabs. And we had Kurt Janssen from the Tourism Alliance speak at one of our shows, and he put out a quiz of 10 questions, and nobody pretty much that answered these got them all right. And so I think as we will become slightly victims of our own success as we grow as an industry, as we become more prominent. Then understandably the B&B industry, the hotel industry, the holiday park industry are going to say, hang on a minute, you guys, you're riding roughshod over a number of rules and regulations that we are fully aware of and that we abide by. And you had better, like, get to it and start to follow the rules. And so I think that along with success will come tighter regulation somewhere along the line, and that'll be a nasty shock to a number of people.
So moving on to your role as the organiser of Eco Resort Network, just for the audience, can you give us a rundown of what they do and whether there's been any particular particularly interesting discussions at those events that might be of value to prospective and existing site owners?
Certainly. Well, we started, so a lot of names here, but I warn you, we started Eco Resort Network. And the idea behind Eco Resort Network was to bring people together in the industry who could help each other, because it was really when I was working on the holiday park side of things, and I was reading about a number of new projects where people had flown all around the world to find out about swimming pools without chemicals, or how to create off-grid floating cabins, or the technology and the experience. It wasn't readily available to people. So perversely, people who were trying to set up eco-friendly projects were burning these carbon miles, going all around the world looking to find people to help them understand more. So we were going to do a physical event in Slovenia in 2020 to bring some people together. And it was going to be just like a convening, really, a big networking session, lots of fun, hopefully some nice meals out. And then COVID came, and so we took it online. We joined up forces with a guy in Portugal called Jay Mendes. And when I say we, that's myself and Maya Dimnik of World of Glamping. So she's based in Slovenia, me in London, and Jay in Portugal. And we're on our fourth. We're starting our fourth summit now. And the first one was a ridiculous 5 days, 90 speakers. We really kicked off. We were like kids in a sweet shop, because with everybody in lockdown, we got access to speakers that we could never have hoped to attract for a first event, because everybody was available. So that's when I interviewed Sanu Shivdasani, as I mentioned before. We had Bill Bensley, who is just like a rock star um, of eco hotel design. So yes, we had 5 days of that, and that got us underway. But our most recent one was the investment summit, and that was really interesting, and because money is a big subject and it's a tricky subject, and for a lot of these projects to ever get anywhere, they need investment, and how to get investment, it's such a difficult thing. And I think it's even more difficult for us in Britain, because we're brought up not to ask for things like money or discuss money. Whereas in the States, I think they're much more open about talking about money and asking for things. And we're a bit polite about it all. So we asked for pitches, we asked for people who were looking for investment to submit their pitches to us. We weren't expecting 60 odd pitches that came in from all over the world, from projects in Antarctica and the Galapagos and God knows where, and it was absolutely fascinating. So I think for me, what I learned from that, all of that, was that you need to know you need to really show how you're going to make money. Now, that might sound like a really basic thing, but so many of us start businesses without really having a proper business plan about how we're going to make it profitable. And so I think that was what I took from it. Do that, show how you're going to make money. If you're going to go and ask somebody else for money, be yourself. Just go in there and tell other people why you're passionate about what you do, and be prepared for lots of rejection along the way, but you'll get there. So So yeah, that was a very interesting, particularly interesting event, and I think we will continue with our online summits. We'll do the next one will be our Restart Summit, and we will incorporate an investment area to it because I felt that there was a particular interest, and it wasn't just that people were thinking, oh, that might be something that's quite curious to listen to. The people that took part, it was their dreams that they were trying to get off the ground. So there was an intensity to it, and they were supporting each other. They were listening to each other's pitches as well and saying, "Wow, that's really really good." And we're in the process now of contacting the investors that were there to try and find out if they'll tell us which of the pitches they heard during the event that they want to take forward. And we will probably, as I say, incorporate that investment aspect in future events too.
Yes, the whole investment thing is a good topic to raise, really, because in the UK there isn't really a culture of, as you say, of asking for money, but also just the whole startup culture. It's massive in the US, but in the UK it's not really a thing. It seems to be business seems to be tend to be more either bootstrapped or just go to a bank to get a loan or something like that. Whereas there are a lot more options to get funding, whether that's getting investment, whether it's getting a loan, whether it's even just for hire purchasing and financing for glamping pods and things like that. There are all sorts of options out there. You don't have to be a rich landowner to get going. Obviously, you need some capital because it's difficult to get absolutely everything funded elsewhere.
Totally. Put your finger on it. I think that what came out of this for me was the different stages that of a business. If even if you've got very little money yourself and you want to get into glamping, it is absolutely possible. In fact, it's one of the attractions of this industry is that you can get started and get going with a relatively small initial outlay. Um, at the moment you can put a few tents up in a field for as 52 days, I believe, and then you can, without even having to have any form of planning permission, for example, and run a small pop-up business. So it is, but the stages really are, start off with your own money as much as possible, or that of friends and family or whoever can support you. And once you prove that you can do it and that it is profitable, then you're in a position to go and either bring in angel investors or bank, but there are all sorts of new brilliant ways, crowdfunding, for example, that if you put the time and effort to research it, can bring you even greater rewards. And I mean, when I started the magazine, for example, I went down a crowdfunding route myself, because the bank were not offering me what I wanted, and I think that certainly I found the whole experience really, really so much more satisfying than going down the traditional bank loan route. So I strongly recommend people, as you say, you can get finance on your accommodation, often from suppliers as well. So consider that it's probably going to cost more than you think when you first. Everybody says that, that despite your best efforts, it will always cost more than you expect. But there are a number of ways in which you can make it affordable.
For the final section, if you could give one tip to anyone thinking of setting up a glamping site or anyone who owns a glamping site but wants to take it to the next level, what would that be?
Oh, it's a big one, isn't it, really? I would say look to do the most with what you've got before you stretch yourself out even further. So it's tempting, I suppose, if you've got a small site, you're doing reasonably well, to say, well, I want to expand that and get a bigger site, for example, and buy more pieces of accommodation and, make that bigger investment. But as I mentioned earlier on, are there other ways in which you can make more money out of what you've already got? So, could you create a wellness aspect to your business, for example? And wellness spending is increasing at twice the rate of any other form of tourism spending. So I don't know whether that means we're all sicker or feeling more stressed or whatever it is, but I think that a lot of the attraction of glamping is that of de-stressing and getting away from our addiction to technology, for example. So wellness is a really good add-on for any glamping business, and it doesn't necessarily require a huge amount of investment. You could make an agreement with a local spa or a local beautician to come and do massage and treatments at the tent, or create your own area for it, or yoga, or all these things. But you could really, I think, instead of expanding straight off the bat, look at what you can do, what you can bring in to make your glamping site more profitable in itself. And then when you go to expand, you've got all this extra expertise and revenue that you can bring to a bigger scale operation. So that would be my advice, I think.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. And before we go, how can people get in touch with you if they want to ask you more?
Oh, well, by whatever means they want, really. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I find LinkedIn really, really useful. Otherwise, by email, or give me a call. My details should be on the glampingbusiness.com website. So it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Glamping Tech podcast. Don't forget to leave a rating and review, and we look forward to seeing you next week.